hear this one? All right. We're going to play around with passing back and forth, which is a little awkward, but bear with us. So, you might be familiar with the word sodium nitrate. Anybody know what that is? Or sodium chloride, sodium chloride, anybody? Yeah, it's salt, but it's the fancy name, right? Now, how many of you know sodium nitrate then? I got some nods before. Yeah, sodium nitrate is a preservative that's in a lot of meats, right? And it's also in smoke bombs and some pyrotechnics. So it's in our food and it's in pyrotechnics. So what about polyphenol glycol alginate? Anybody know what that is? It is. It's a thickener. And this thickener is in our salad dressings. It's in our sweet stuff like ice cream. And it's in yogurts and dressings and that sort of thing. So you can find all sorts of things in our foods. And you can find all sorts of ideas out there on whether it's good for you or not good for you. And so one of our first messages is to question everything. We want you to question everything that's on that package.
So really our first message is to not eat things in packages. Then we wouldn't have to stand up here and talk to you about this. So the idea is that you're here because you're interested in learning how to read the labels of the foods that you eat. And given it's not that we only eat food that doesn't come with labels. We eat foods with labels too. So we're not, there's no better or worse. We all eat foods that come in packages. A lot of those packages have long lists of things. And everyone has heard, don't eat anything with anything more than 5 ingredients. We've heard all these things before. And I imagine if you're here, you have a sense of health that you've probably heard a lot of this stuff already before. So we're trying not to tell you anything you may not have heard. Or maybe we are, we're just trying to remind you of things that you've heard and need to be reminded of. We need to be reminded of these things too. So how often do you look at a package, go to buy something, and it's a brand that you may be familiar with. You look at the package, and it usually has some kind of health claim on it, and you don't turn it around to look at the ingredients because you trust that brand. You may have bought it before. It says organic on it. It says whatever else it says, and you put it in your supermarket bag and you take it home. How many times have you done that without actually looking at the ingredient labels? I think everybody probably would raise their hand. I've done that too. Later to find out, I turn it over later just for whatever reason and say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize this had something else in it that I wasn't prepared for. And maybe it's because they changed their ingredients, or maybe it's because I've learned something since the last time I bought it, and those ingredients have changed. But the idea is that there's often ingredients in things that we trust because we trust that brand, or ingredients we don't know of because we just never thought about it before. And it's a scary thing to not know what you're eating. What are you putting in your mouth?
Yeah, and I think that's another thing for us as well, is that we have often gotten to this point where we're so scared of food, we're questioning everything that goes into our body, right? And we can become, the term is called orthorexia. And orthorexia is the idea of being so fanatic about what goes in our body and what is on the plate that we become socially isolated and don't actually connect well with others because we're making assumptions of others, we're making bold statements about others on what's on their plate and that sort of thing. So when we're looking at labels, we're also shocked me. So what we wanted to talk with you about today is the idea about real food. We wanted to define what real food is, because if something, so how many of you think apples and broccoli and salmon is sexy? right? So it's beautiful though. The apple is nice and red and it's delicious, right? That first temptation. But the boxes and bags and the cans often have so much propaganda on it that it's leading us to believe and to think that we're actually doing something really well for our body. So these marketing messages of slimming and nutrient-full and what are some other heart healthy, we're going to be talking about some of these stamps and labels. But what the truth is turning over the package and not being seduced ultimately from the front of the package. And going to the very smallest print on that package. It's actually the tiniest thing to find on the packages, and that's what we need to actually look for. It's not actually the numbers of how many sugars and how much fibers and that sort of thing. It's really what the ingredients list is.
The ingredient list, like she said, is often the smallest, and some of us have to actually put glasses on to see it, unfortunately. But it's important for you to do that. So bring your glasses to the supermarket so that you can look at ingredient lists if you're going to be buying packaged foods. You may know or not know that the very first ingredient is what's mostly in that package. And so it goes from there that every ingredient after that, there's a little bit less of that. But the very first ingredient is what's in there the most. And I know a lot of, especially treats that we might buy our kids, the very first ingredient is often sugar in some form. Often the first 3 ingredients are some form of sugar. So it might say sugar, it might say corn syrup, it might say dextrose, it might say maltose, whatever it is. But there's lots of words that we may not be familiar with that all mean one thing. Sugar is one of those. But there's a few of them. Salt is another one. MSG, which is monosodium glutamate, has many different terms associated with it, and that can be a neurotoxin. That MSG is a neurotoxin for many people. It's actually a neurotoxin for everyone. It doesn't affect everyone the same, but it makes people sick. It's famously in Chinese food, American Chinese food, let me say that, but it's in so many other things as well. And we don't always know what it's called because it comes off as autolyzed yeast extract, sometimes just yeast, sometimes natural flavor, sometimes spices. I'm actually proud of packages that say monosodium glutamate, because at least they're being, transparent about it. But the idea is that, looking at the ingredients, again, if you see a block of ingredients this big, that's kind of your first sign that it may not be good. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not good, because there's protein powders out there and meal replacement foods that are out there that are processed foods. They are heavily processed, but they have nutrients in them that aren't necessarily bad for us, and the list might be this long. So I don't want to say that avoid every list that's this long. Avoid most of them. And know that broccoli and apples and bananas and carrots don't have ingredient lists. And most foods that don't have ingredient lists are perfectly fine for us.
One of the other things that we define real food, so when you're in the grocery store and you're in the bread aisle, or you're in the aisle with the dressings, or you're in the aisle with the crackers or the chips, know that there's not a lot of color there. There's not a lot of nutrient density there. And that's one of the things we talk with our clients a lot about, is this idea that nutrient density packs everything in it. The higher the nutrient density means the closer to real food, which is talking about the soil, which we just heard about from our speakers before. So the food is in which the soil it was created from. And all of that soil and all of that environment and all of that goes into that beautiful apple comes from the original source and the farm. So it's very confusing when you walk it down the aisle of the bread aisle, because there are so many choices. Now we do have a lot of choices on apples, the different kinds of apples, but it's one ingredient, it's the apple. Who here has any very specific questions about a label? the question that she's talking about, the tastelessness of some of our produce, and this is becoming a big issue. We were talking about shipping greens from California to the East Coast and how it doesn't taste the same as picking it from your backyard. And one of the things that Debbie and I do to coach our clients is talk about eating seasonally and eating from the farms and participating with the farmers markets. These are all really important local ways to actually become that resilience that we're looking for. I don't know about you. Show of hands, anyone here wants to feel resilient? Yeah, we want to feel resilient, and most of that comes from our food. But at Nourish Coaches, we talk about everything else because we're a web. It's our food choices, it's our sleep choices, it's our mindfulness choices, it's how we move our body, and it's how we're connecting. And thanks to We Forum, we're doing a lot of connecting today with very like-minded people who all want to feel resilient, who all want to wake up feeling a little bit better than they did the day before, and really showing up for our families and the community at large. So back to the question about being tasteless, part of it is seasonal eating, part of it is going to your local farms. The strawberries and blueberries in the market right now really just don't taste very good, right? That's why you binge eat on berries in the summer. Right? So what's in season right now are pears and apples and soon citrus. One of the things that we're going to be talking about later in the budget is how much money we're in the budget class this afternoon. We're talking again is how much money we're spending on food. And when we're talking about labels and what's actually in our food, we want to be cognizant about how much that bag is and how much nutrient density is in that bag or that box versus in the vegetables.
Also on that note, she didn't mention whether the apple was organic or not, and often organic produce tastes a little bit better than conventional because they're not allowed to put preservatives and other things on them that tend to make them last longer and not taste as well. But that said, that's one of the things that you find on labels now a lot. Organic. You see organic on a lot of labels now, and sometimes that's all it takes for people to buy something because they're like, well, if it's organic, then it's going to be okay. And that, to me, that used to be true and isn't so much anymore. And I'm not saying it's not true necessarily. It's definitely better to choose something that's labeled organic than it's not. But the rules about organic have shifted over the last few years, and they're not quite as stringent as they used to be. There are a few movements now to get better labeling, so almost an additional label that'll go on top of the organic. So it'll be organic plus another label that'll say this is even more stringent and there's better rules for this produce. And so now, you know, we're gonna be getting additional labels saying, yeah, organic's okay, but this is even better because it's more organic. But there's movements like that because the government has loosened a lot of the regulations when it comes to being organic. So there's some pesticides allowed, there's some preservatives allowed, there's some things allowed that weren't allowed before. They've loosened some of the animal humane treatments a little bit. So there's animals out there that are not treated as well as they used to be when they were organic. So be skeptical, question those labels. When they have lots of advertisements on the package, to me, the more advertisements they have on the package, the more I want to leave it alone. Because if they have to advertise that they're that healthy or that great without really being that way, it's most likely not going to be that great. You know, food should sell itself on its taste, on its nutrition, on its health. So if the box has to tell me how healthy it is, that makes me skeptical. So when you go in supermarkets and you're looking at things, again, look at how long the ingredient list, look at what's on the ingredient list first, second, third, fourth. Look at the labels that it says, how much it's advertising, how colorful the package is to try to sell you what it is that's in there. And think, how far away is this package from, say, something that I would pull from the ground or pick from the tree or pull off a bush? Think about how real that food actually is, and then think twice about buying it.
Exactly. She's confirming what I was just going to say is that if it says on the package front that it's organic, turning it over and again looking at that long ingredients list and making sure every single thing on that list is organic. We had a couple of other things we wanted to share with you about labels and tags. One of them is the American Heart Association checkbox, right? That check. So the rules for that one are that they're looking at fiber and fat content and a couple of other things, but they're not looking at sugar content. They're not looking at whether it has high fructose corn syrup in it. They're not looking at whether or not that has artificial colors or sweeteners or flavors in it. So just because it has a heart-healthy checkbox on it, please don't think that it might not have something else in it, because it's not actually not analyzing the whole product. It just meets this tiny bit of criteria. So that's another thing to also question. Yeah, there's an app out there. There are a couple of apps we want to share with you. There's the app Fujicate. And Fujicate actually does some analysis of packaged goods and gives them ratings. Food-U-Cate. Like educate, but with food. Food-U-Cate. And the other one is the Environmental Working Group. EWG.org is a vast research. It's an independent research organization that helps analyze our fruits and our vegetables and helps us understand. Repeat it, yes. Environmental Working Group, EWG.org. And that organization helps us decide, like we're going to talk about this afternoon, where to spend our money, because it helps tell us what are the most pesticide-riddled foods and the least pesticide-riddled foods. So EWG is a great one. That's a really good question.
Of course, it's better if it has both organic and non-GMO. I often choose non-GMO over organic personally, and the reason I do that is because of what I've researched about GMO, being that much worse than some of the practices with organic. And if you're eating a high nutrient-dense diet anyway, our bodies can handle so much, but to add GMOs on top of non-organic eating, I think, for me, seems more dangerous.
Really super question. I love it. The question is when you have the choice of non-organic or organic. Or local, organic versus local. And what we want to say about that is many, many local farmers are doing a lot of really beautiful organic farming, but they just don't have the label. And so you want to be familiar with the farmer down the street and what their practices are, and have a heart-to-heart with them and look them in the eye and talk to them. You can also tell often by the taste. You can taste it in the carrot or the beet or the apple as well. So oftentimes I will choose local over the organic label, especially if it's been shipped in. We really appreciate your time and attention today and being here at the conference. Nourish coaches, we want to thank We Forum. There are several ways to stay in contact with us. We have a podcast, we have a newsletter, we have our practices in Red Bank. We meet one-on-one, we meet with groups, etc. So we really look forward to reconnecting with you. We'll be in what room? We're all going to be funneling downstairs now, but we'll stay up here for a couple of minutes if you have any questions. And please sign up for our newsletter if you would like to, and you can take a peek at our Nourish cookbook. We're co-authors of a cookbook with all